Hello, and welcome back to Velvet Haunt. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy chilling tales that linger in the velvet dark, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare. Relax your mind. Let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1, I don't think any of this started because of something I did. My family never practiced strange rituals. We never played with spirit boards, tried to contact the dead, or went searching for places we had been warned to avoid. I never opened some locked door in an abandoned house. I never stole anything from a graveyard. I never read from an old book filled with symbols I didn't understand. As far as I know, none of us did anything that could explain what happened. There was no clear mistake, no terrible choice, no moment I could look back on and say, that was when we invited it in. If there is a reason this started, I still don't know what it is. That is what frightens me most. Last weekend, I visited my parents' house with my brother and sister. We are all adults now, even though that fact still feels strange whenever we are together. I'm turning 30 this year, but the moment I walk through my parents' front door, I somehow become the youngest child again. My brother Ross is the oldest. He has always acted like a second father, even when nobody asked him to. My sister, Sam, is the middle child. She has always been the loudest of the three of us and the quickest to turn anything embarrassing into a family joke. Then there's me, Mitchell, the youngest. Being almost 30 means nothing when you are under the roof where you grew up. My mother still asks whether I remembered to bring a jacket. My father still warns me not to stay up too late. Ross still gives me advice I didn't ask for, and Sam still brings up things I did when I was 12. It was one of those rare weekends when everyone happened to be free. There was no birthday, holiday, or special event. Nobody had made a big plan. We simply decided to spend some time together. My dad ordered more Chinese food than 5 people could possibly eat. My mom opened a bottle of bourbon for Ross and me, although she ended up drinking almost as much as we did. Sam stayed with wine and complained that the bourbon smelled like furniture polish. We sat in the living room for hours, eating from white takeout boxes and talking about people we had not seen in years. Old teachers, former neighbors, childhood friends whose faces we could still picture even though none of us knew where they lived now. We argued about which of us had broken the garage window with a baseball. Ross blamed me. I blamed Sam. Sam claimed the window had already been cracked, which was obviously a lie. It was comfortable, familiar, the kind of evening that makes you forget how much time has passed. At some point, Dad stood up and disappeared down the hallway. We heard him opening the closet near his office and moving things around. A few minutes later, he returned carrying a cardboard box in both hands. The box looked ancient. The bottom was dark and warped, as though it had once been left in a damp basement. One side had a long water stain running across it, and the tape holding the corners together had turned yellow. Found these last week, Dad said, placing the box on the coffee table. We should watch some tonight. Inside were old home videos. There were full-size VH tapes, smaller mini-DV cassettes, and several recordable DVDs in thin plastic cases. Some were tied together with rubber bands that had become dry and brittle with age. When Dad tried to lift one bundle, the band snapped and broke into little pieces. Most of the tapes were labeled in his handwriting. Christmas 1996. Ross baseball. Sam's 5th birthday. Florida trip. Thanksgiving at Grandma's. School play. The ordinary pieces of a family's life. The moments nobody thinks about until they are found again in the bottom of an old box. Ross and Sam became excited immediately. I was interested too, but watching our home videos had always been a strange experience for me. There were endless recordings of Ross and Sam. Their birthdays, school events, holidays, sports games, and graduations had all been captured from beginning to end. There were photographs of me, of course, plenty of them, but almost no videos. It had become a running joke in our family. Dad always said the camera broke around the time I became old enough to remember anything. Mom claimed they were simply too tired by the third child to record every little event. I laughed along whenever they brought it up, but part of me had always felt left out. Ross had a video of his high school graduation. Sam had several recordings of hers from different angles. I barely remembered Dad holding a camera during mine, even though I was certain he had filmed it. We carried the box down to the basement. The room had changed since we were children, but not completely. The old carpet was still there, faded and rough beneath our feet. A large television sat against the far wall beside shelves, filled with DVDs nobody watched anymore. Dad kept an old combination V8s and DVD player connected to the television. He said it was for exactly this kind of situation, although Mom rolled her eyes and reminded him that he refused to throw away any electronic device that still turned on. We sat wherever we could find space. Ross and I took the couch. Sam sat cross-legged on the carpet. Mom lowered herself into the old armchair with her drink, and Dad knelt beside the box, trying to decide which tape to play first. He finally chose one at random. The footage was exactly what you would expect from a family recording made in the mid-1990s. The picture was soft and slightly washed out. The camera shook whenever Dad walked. He zoomed in too far, then struggled to find his subject again. The sound changed every time his thumb brushed against the microphone. Ross appeared first, riding his bike in circles on the driveway while Dad encouraged him to go faster. Sam kept running in front of the camera, waving her arms and demanding attention. She could not have been older than 5. "Nothing's changed," Ross said. Sam threw a cushion at him. The footage cut suddenly to Mom feeding me in a booster chair. I was covered in some kind of orange baby food and kept trying to grab the spoon. Then came Christmas morning. Sam opened a sweater and tried very hard to look happy about it. A younger version of Ross sat behind her, laughing because he knew she hated it. The camera moved again, and there I was. I could not have been more than 3 or 4. I stood so close to the lens that my entire face filled the screen. I babbled into the camera, reached toward the small flip-out display, and asked to see myself. Everyone laughed. For a while, it was fun. We pointed out old furniture, forgotten clothes, and relatives who had passed away. We noticed how young our parents looked. We laughed at Dad's mustache and Mom's enormous glasses. It was the kind of nostalgia people talk about in movies. Warm, slightly sad, and almost comforting enough to make you believe the past was better than it really had been. Dad switched to another tape. The label said 4th of July, 1999. The recording showed a large party in our backyard. I remembered that day, although only in small pieces. The smell of grilled meat, sparklers after sunset. The cold shock of jumping into the pool. There were folding tables covered with food and paper plates. Children ran through the grass while adults stood near the grill holding drinks. Music played faintly from a radio somewhere off camera. About halfway through the video, Sam suddenly laughed and pointed at the screen. "Oh, wow," she said. "Is that Mrs. England?" Dad pressed pause. The image froze and trembled slightly. At first, I couldn't see what Sam was pointing at. The screen was crowded with people. Dad had been filming Ross and two other boys throwing a beach ball near the pool. Then I noticed the woman near the edge of the frame. She was standing beside the fence. She had tan skin, curly brown hair, and dark purple lipstick that looked almost black in the poor quality recording. She was not waving or speaking to anyone. She was simply standing there. "Oh my goodness," Mom said, leaning forward. "That is Diana. Once I saw her, I could not understand how I had missed her. Diana England had lived next door when we were growing up. Nothing separated our properties except her garden, a wooden fence, and a strip of overgrown grass between the houses. We occasionally played with her children in the cul-de-sac. Her daughters, Rebecca and Julie, were close to Sam's age. She also had two younger boys. They were all quiet children. A little strange, perhaps, but not in a way that seemed dangerous. Diana's husband was a doctor. I barely remembered him. He always seemed to be working, and his car came and went at unusual hours. Diana was the one we saw constantly. She was always outside, usually gardening. She would kneel in the dirt for hours, pulling weeds and planting flowers. Whenever we walked past, she smiled and waved. Her left eye drifted outward. I know it is cruel to say, but as a child, I found it unsettling. When she spoke to you, one eye seemed to be looking at your face while the other focused on something behind you. She was not frightening exactly. She was just slightly wrong in a way I had never been able to explain. "Creepy," Ross sang, stretching the word out. "That actually is creepy," Mom said with a laugh before taking another sip of her drink. Diana looked thinner in the video than I remembered. Her cheeks were narrow, and her clothes seemed loose around her body. She stood with her back straight, and her arms hanging stiffly at her sides. She was always watching from somewhere. Dad said, "I swear that woman knew our schedule better than we did." Mom frowned at the screen. "Why is she standing near the fence by the pool?" Her house was on the other side. "We probably invited her," Sam said. "No chance," Dad replied immediately. "Absolutely not." We all laughed. Dad had never disliked Diana, but he hated being trapped in conversations with her. If she caught him at the mailbox, she could talk for an hour. She moved from topic to topic without ever pausing long enough for him to escape. Mom told a story about seeing Diana walking her dog and turning around before she could be noticed. "It's sad that Rebecca and Julie moved away around the same time," Ross said. "You never see them visiting. She still has the boys," Dad said quickly. His tone changed when he said it, only slightly. I looked at him, but he was already reaching for the remote. He pressed play, and the image came back to life. Diana disappeared from the frame as the camera moved toward the pool. Eventually, the tape ended. Mom yawned and announced that she was going to bed. Sam followed her upstairs a few minutes later. Ross stayed long enough to finish his drink, then stood, stretched, and said he was tired too. Dad had already gone upstairs to help Mom find extra blankets. Soon, I was alone in the basement. The house became quiet in the way only a childhood home can. Every sound felt familiar. The refrigerator humming in the kitchen above me. Pipes knocking gently inside the wall. The clock near the stairs ticking louder than it seemed to during the day. Wind brushed against the side of the house. I should have gone to bed. Instead, I remained on the floor beside the box, looking through the remaining tapes and discs. I have always been a night owl. Even as a child, I stayed awake long after everyone else. There was something peaceful about being the only person awake in the house. Near the bottom of the box, I found a DVD without a date. There was no holiday, event, or year written on it. It had only one word, written neatly in my father's handwriting. Mitchell. I stared at it for a moment. Then I smiled. It had to be my high school graduation video. I remembered that day clearly. The uncomfortable heat beneath the graduation robe. The folding chairs lined across the football field. My mother crying before the ceremony had even started. I remembered Dad carrying the camera. In fact, he had filmed almost the entire day. That was why it felt strange that I couldn't remember ever watching the video. I placed the DVD in the player. The machine made a low mechanical sound. The screen remained blue for several seconds, then went black. The player seemed to struggle with the disc. I waited. The video was not especially old. It should have played without a problem. I began to feel annoyed, as though I were putting far too much effort into watching something that probably did not matter. Finally, the screen flickered. For less than a second, I thought I saw a garden. Rows of dark flowers, wet soil, something pale standing between the plants. Then the image disappeared. The footage began. The colors were distorted at first, with green and purple shadows moving across the screen. After a few seconds, the picture became clear enough to recognize. It was not my graduation. It was another birthday party. Sam's 16th birthday. I recognized the large tent in the backyard and the folding tables beside the pool. Inflatable toys drifted across the water. Music played from speakers near the patio. Dad moved through the party with the camera, filming everything. Sam and several friends played a game in the pool. The camera moved to Ross as he took an enormous bite from a hot dog. Mom stood behind him, asking whether anyone needed another drink. It was ordinary footage, warm and familiar. I was 11 or 12 years old in the video. The camera found me standing at the top of the pool slide. I lay on my stomach, facing forward, and launched myself headfirst while screaming like Tarzan. I hit the water with a huge splash. Dad laughed behind the camera. The view widened, capturing almost the entire pool. I leaned closer to the television and tried to recognize everyone. There was Rachel near the steps. Anthony was sitting on the side with his feet in the water. Connor and Aunt Beth were near the deep end. Kaylee floated past on an inflatable ring. The camera moved slowly from one face to another. Then my heart seemed to stop. Diana England was standing in the pool. The camera passed over her so quickly that I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. But I knew what I had seen. I grabbed the remote and pressed rewind. Nothing happened. I pressed it again. The video jumped forward instead. "Come on," I whispered. I pressed several buttons, but the player refused to go backwards. Each attempt only pushed the video ahead another second. I stopped trying. I didn't want to miss anything. The camera shook suddenly, and the angle dropped. Dad must have placed it on one of the tables. The pool and most of the people around it remained visible. Children laughed and jumped into the water. Adults moved in and out of the frame carrying plates and towels. And there she was. Diana stood near the deep end with water around her waist. She was facing the camera. One eye looked directly into the lens. The other drifted toward the side. A cold feeling moved down my back. It was not only because she was in the pool. It was not only because she seemed to be staring through the television at me. It was her clothes. She was wearing the exact same outfit she had worn in the 4th of July recording. The same pale shirt. The same dark trousers. The same purple lipstick. That first video had been filmed in 1999. Sam's 16th birthday had taken place in 2007. 8 years had passed between the recordings. Diana looked exactly the same. Her hair had not changed. Her face had not aged. Even the wrinkles in her clothes appeared identical. I moved closer to the television. Nobody in the pool reacted to her. Children swam around her. One boy passed so close that his shoulders should have touched her side, but he did not look at her. She stood among them as though she were invisible. At the same time, she was the clearest person in the recording. Everyone else blurred when they moved. Their faces became soft and grainy. The sunlight flashed across the water and damaged the image. Diana remained perfectly focused. Every curl of her hair was visible, every line around her mouth, every dark shape between her teeth as she smiled. A younger version of me shouted from somewhere in the pool. Gainer. I watched myself leap from the side and hit the water again. My head appeared above the surface several feet away, bobbing like a fishing float. The camera began to zoom in. At first, I assumed Dad had returned, but the camera remained on the table. Nobody stood behind it. The zoom continued slowly, following me through the water. I struggled to reach the shallow end, my toes barely touching the bottom. I remembered being a poor swimmer at that age, although I did not remember feeling afraid during that party. The camera moved closer. My small, pale face filled the screen. Then, something struck me. My head disappeared beneath the water. At first, I thought another child had bumped into me. Then, an arm appeared from the left side of the frame. A hand pressed against my face. It held me beneath the surface. Water exploded around my body. My arms and legs thrashed wildly. My hands broke through the surface, searching for something to grab. "What the hell?" I whispered. My younger self continued struggling. Nobody came to help. Children laughed only a few feet away. Adults carried on talking. Music played near the patio. It was as though they could not see me drowning. The camera zoomed out slightly, revealing more of the arm holding me down. The skin was darker than mine. The arm was very thin. I stared at the screen, trying to understand what I was seeing. I had no memory of this. I had never nearly drowned at Sam's birthday party. Surely I would remember something like that. My parents would have remembered. Ross or Sam would have mentioned it at some point. The camera began following the arm. It moved away from my struggling body, traveling along the forearm toward the elbow. But the elbow never appeared. More and more of the arm came into view. It stretched across the water like a rope. The camera kept moving. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. There was still more arm. "That isn't possible," I said. My chest tightened. The arm had to be more than 10 feet long, perhaps 15. It crossed the pool in a straight line, while the hand remained fixed against my face. The splashing continued behind the camera's movement. My screams were muffled beneath the water. "Somebody do something!" I shouted. My voice echoed through the basement. For one frightened second, I expected someone upstairs to wake up. No footsteps came. The camera continued following the impossible arm. Then, without warning, Diana's face filled the screen. She was smiling. Her right eye stared directly into the camera. Her left eye pointed toward my body beneath the water. I stopped breathing. Her skin looked waxy at that distance. Her lips were dark and slightly wet. The smile stretched too far across her face, revealing small, narrow teeth. I looked away from the television. I don't know why I didn't turn it off. I don't know why I didn't get up and run upstairs. I felt frozen. A childish thought entered my mind. I believed that if I moved, Diana would stop looking into the camera. She would look into the basement instead. The sounds of splashing became weaker. Then they stopped. My younger self no longer struggled. The room was silent, except for the low hum of the DVD player. I forced myself to look back. Diana's expression had changed. Her smile was gone. Her mouth hung slightly open. Both eyes seemed wider now. For the first time, she looked surprised, or disappointed. The camera began to pull away from her face. Sound slowly returned. Wet footsteps slapped against the concrete around the pool. Rock music played in the distance. People laughed and shouted. Everything returned to normal. The frame widened until it showed the same view of the pool from the table. I stared at the screen with my mouth open. The surface of the water was calm. Then I saw movement near the shallow end. There I was. My younger self climbed out of the pool. I stood, wiped water from my face, and ran toward the grass. Alive, a few seconds later, the younger version of me shouted, "Gainer," and jumped into the pool again as though nothing had happened. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Relief spread through me so quickly that I almost laughed. For one moment, I believed the terrible scene had only been a glitch, a damaged section of the recording, some impossible mixture of frames caused by the broken disc. Then I looked at Diana. She was still standing in the deep end. She had returned to her original smile. She had not moved. Except for her arm. It remained stretched across the entire pool, at least 12 feet long. It floated on the surface like one of the dividing ropes at a public swimming pool, a line separating one side from the other. Do not cross. Nobody did. Every person in the water stayed on the opposite side of that arm. Children swam toward it, then changed direction, without seeming to notice. Adults walked around the pool but never stepped across its shadow. The camera remained fixed on the scene. Diana stared at the lens. Her long arm drifted slightly with the movement of the water. Then, her fingers began to move, one finger at a time. Slowly, deliberately, they curled against the edge of the pool and pulled. Her body moved closer to the camera without her legs taking a single step. The disc skipped. The screen became black. White text appeared in the center. Mitchell, I jumped up and pressed the eject button. Nothing happened. The name remained on the screen. I pressed the power button. The television turned off. The room went dark. For several seconds, I stood there, staring at my reflection in the black screen. Then another reflection appeared behind me. A woman stood near the basement stairs. Curly hair, thin body, one eye looking at me, the other looking somewhere else. I spun around. Nobody was there. The basement door at the top of the stairs was open. I was certain it had been closed before. I ran upstairs and locked myself in the guest room. I did not sleep. Every few minutes, I heard a soft sound somewhere in the house. Wet footsteps. They moved from the basement to the kitchen, from the kitchen to the hallway. Then they stopped outside my door. In the morning, I asked my father about the disc. He looked confused. He said he had never written my name on a DVD. We went down to the basement together. The disc was gone. The DVD player was empty. Dad searched the box, but we could not find it anywhere. I asked him about Diana England. He became quiet. Then he told me something none of us had mentioned the night before. Diana died in 1998, 1 year before the 4th of July video was recorded. Her husband found her in their garden early one morning. She was lying between 2 rows of flowers with her hands buried deep in the soil. Her daughters moved away soon afterward. The boys stayed with their father for several years. I asked Dad why he had acted as though Diana were still alive when we watched the first tape. He stared at me. "We didn't see Diana," he said. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. According to Dad, Sam had pointed at an old plastic scarecrow standing near the fence. Mom had said it reminded her of Diana because of its curly brown straw hair. They had laughed about Diana being strange, but there had been no woman in the recording. I called Ross and Sam. They told me the same thing. Neither of them remembered seeing Diana on the screen. Neither of them remembered Dad pausing on her face. I searched through the box again after everyone left. The 4th of July tape was still there. I played it alone. There was no woman by the fence, only a scarecrow in Diana's garden. Its body was made from an old shirt and a pair of dark trousers. Someone had painted purple lips across its cloth face. As the camera moved away, one of its button eyes turned toward me. The other continued staring at the pool. Story 2. Years ago, I worked in lumber and forestry outside a small mountain town that some people might remember, though most probably do not. It was one of those places that looked forgotten by the rest of the country. There was no big highway cutting through it, no chain stores, no fancy hotels, and no reason for anyone to visit unless they had family there or work in the woods. I left that town for good around this same time of year. It had been one of the coldest winters anyone could remember, but for a few days, the temperature suddenly rose. The snow softened. Ice began dripping from rooftops, and the roads turned into deep brown mud during the day before freezing again at night. We were going through the same kind of strange warm spell people are talking about now. Whenever the weather turns like this, I think about that town. More than that, I think about Shelley. Back then, I worked with a crew clearing overgrowth from a mountainside. The work was rough, wet, and dangerous. We cut dead branches, removed fallen trees, cleared brush, and tried to open paths through areas that had been ignored for years. Some days we worked with chainsaws from sunrise until dark. Other days we dragged heavy branches through snow that came nearly to our knees. By the time I returned to my small rented room each evening, my arms felt like they had been pulled from their sockets. My back hurt, my hands were cracked, and my clothes smelled like gasoline, sweat, and pine sap. I did not mind. At that age, hard work made me feel useful. I liked being outside, even in the cold. I liked the silence of the forest and the clean smell of freshly cut wood. Besides, I had something better to think about. I was only a few days away from taking a trip to sunny Florida with the prettiest girl I had ever met. Her name was Shelley, and she lived in town. She worked behind the bar at Miller's Mountain Pub, which was the closest thing the place had to a social center. Everyone went there. Loggers, road workers, hunters, teachers, farmers, and old men who had lived in the valley their entire lives all sat beneath the same faded signs and drank from the same heavy glass mugs. Shelley had worked there for a few years. She had dark hair, bright eyes, and a smile that could make a tired man forget he had spent 10 hours cutting timber in freezing rain. We had been seeing each other for several months. The Florida trip was supposed to be our first real holiday together. 5 full days away from snow, work, wet boots, and small-town gossip. We had booked a hotel near the beach. Shelley had bought a new swimsuit and kept reminding me that I was not allowed to laugh when my pale mountain skin burned bright red on the first day. I had never looked forward to anything more. One evening after work, instead of taking the main road into town, I decided to use an old walking path through the woods. It was a narrow trail that started near the worksite and came out behind a row of houses close to the pub. The route was shorter, though most people avoided it in winter. The snow was deeper beneath the trees, and parts of the path became slippery where water ran down from the mountain. I had used it several times before. I had never met anyone else on it. That afternoon, the light was already beginning to fade when I reached the trailhead. The sky was pale gray, and the woods were unusually quiet. The snow under my boots was heavy and wet because of the warmer air. I was adjusting the strap of my bag when a man stepped out in front of me. He did not come from behind a tree or walk around a bend. One moment the path was empty, and the next he was standing there. I stopped so suddenly that my boots slid forward in the snow. The stranger looked to be somewhere between 40 and 60. It was difficult to tell. His face was pale and narrow, with deep lines around his mouth. He wore an old, dark coat that looked too thin for the weather. His trousers were wet at the bottom, but he did not seem cold. He stared at me as though he had been waiting for me. "Getting 6 feet of snow come Monday," he said. There was no hello, no question about where I was going, no friendly nod. He spoke as if we were already in the middle of a conversation. 6 feet? I replied. I tried to sound friendly, but his sudden appearance had unsettled me. We were used to snow in those mountains. There was already about a foot on the ground in some places, and more in the higher areas. But 6 feet in one storm was something else entirely. "Come Monday," he said again. His voice was flat and empty. It was not friendly, but it was not threatening either. He spoke without emotion, like someone reading words from a page he did not understand. "Well," I said, forcing a small laugh, "I hope it doesn't interfere with my travel plans." "Off to sunny Florida?" That made the skin on my arms tighten beneath my coat. I stared at him. There were probably many ways he could have guessed. Maybe he had heard me talking to someone at work. Maybe he had seen Shelley discussing the trip at the pub. Maybe he knew someone who knew us. It was a small town, after all. Secrets did not stay secret for long. Still, there was something about the way he said it that frightened me. He did not sound like a man repeating gossip. He sounded like he knew where I was going because he had already seen it happen. "Heck of a guess," I said. The stranger did not smile. 6 feet coming Monday," he repeated. "Might catch an earlier flight." Then he turned and walked away. I muttered something like, "Take care," but he did not answer. I watched him go for a few seconds before continuing on to the path. His footprints were easy to follow. The snow was deep, soft, and wet, and his boots had left clear tracks in front of me. Since he had come from the direction of town, I stepped into the marks he had already made. For a while, I felt foolish for being nervous. He was only a strange local man. Every small town had a few people who enjoyed saying odd things to strangers. Maybe he had checked the weather and misunderstood the forecast. Maybe he had heard someone joking about a huge storm. Then the footprints stopped. I nearly walked past the final one before I understood what I was seeing. The stranger's tracks continued down the center of the path and then simply ended. There was no trail leading into the trees. There was no place where he had stepped over a log or climbed onto a rock. There were no other prints anywhere nearby. The last footprint sat in the middle of the trail, as though he had dropped from the sky onto that exact spot and started walking toward me. I stood there for a long time. I searched both sides of the path. I pushed through the trees and looked for broken branches. I checked the snow for marks that might have been hidden beneath falling clumps from the branches. There was nothing. The snow around the trail was smooth and untouched. At the time, I was not the kind of man who searched for mystery in ordinary things. I did not believe every strange sound was a ghost or every odd person was a warning from beyond. I believed there was a sensible explanation for nearly everything. But standing there in that silent forest, I could not find one. Eventually, I continued toward town. Every few minutes, I glanced over my shoulder. I kept expecting to see the stranger standing behind me or watching from between the trees. The path remained empty. Soon, the woods opened, and I saw the town below. It was the most beautiful mountain town I had ever known. The valley was narrow, with steep white mountains rising on both sides. Dark forests covered the lower slopes, while the higher peaks were bare and bright with snow. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin lines. Warm yellow lights shone through windows as evening settled over the streets. It looked like a picture from another time. There were no crowds of tourists, no rich outsiders buying land and building enormous holiday homes. There were no souvenir shops selling fake mountain life to people who stayed for 3 days. It was simply a small, working town filled with people who knew one another. At least, that was how I remember it. I walked through the back streets and entered Miller's Mountain Pub. Heat rolled over me the moment I opened the door. The place smelled of beer, fried food, wet coats, and smoke from the fireplace. A few men from the road crew sat near the window, and an older couple was eating dinner in the corner. Shelley stood behind the bar, filling a glass from the tap. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. "You look frozen," she said. "I've been warmer." I took off my coat, sat on my usual stool, and accepted the beer she placed in front of me. "You hear we've got 6 feet of fresh snow coming Monday?" I asked. She gave me a sideways look. "Can't be. That's what I heard. I'm leaving for Florida on Monday," she said. I forbid any weather from interfering with my plans. I have it on good authority. What authority? A strange man who appeared in the woods and knew exactly where we were going. Shelley stared at me for half a second, then leaned across the bar and kissed me. Well, in that case, I'm convinced. She walked away to refill someone's mug. I smiled, but the uneasy feeling from the trail had not fully disappeared. I took out my phone and checked the weather forecast. Snow was expected on Monday. 3 inches. I laughed quietly. That was nothing. 3 inches barely counted as a storm in that part of the country. Roads would be cleared before breakfast, and flights might be delayed by an hour at most. The stranger was either confused or trying to frighten me. Over the weekend, however, the forecast changed. On Friday night, it showed 5 inches. By Saturday morning, it had increased to 8. Saturday evening, the warning said 10 to 12 inches. Every time I refreshed the weather app, the expected snowfall rose a little more. The storm was growing stronger, as it moved toward the mountains. The warm spell meant the snow would be thick, heavy, and wet instead of light powder. Local reports warned about difficult roads, falling trees, and the possibility of power cuts. By Sunday, they were predicting a full foot. Still, it was nowhere near 6 feet. I tried to laugh about it, but the stranger's voice remained in my head. 6 feet coming Monday. Might catch an earlier flight. That Sunday evening, I sat at the end of the bar while Shelley worked her final shift before our trip. "How about we get an earlier flight?" I asked. She placed 2 clean glasses on a shelf. "How early?" "There's one at 5 in the morning." She stared at me. "I don't finish here until midnight. You could go home, shower, grab your bag, and head straight to the airport. That gives me about 5 hours between my last drink poured and sitting on a plane. You can sleep on the flight. I cannot sleep on planes. You slept through that bus trip to Nashville. That was different." "How?" "There wasn't a stranger kicking the back of my seat and a baby screaming 2 rows away." I smiled, but she could see I was serious. "You're really worried about the snow?" she asked. "I just don't want us to miss the trip." "We won't. The storm keeps getting worse. It's 1 foot. That's what they're saying now." Shelley folded her arms. "You're thinking about that man again?" "A little." She shook her head. "You met some local fool who probably heard about our vacation from someone in the pub. And the 6 feet? He was exaggerating. And the footprints? You were tired." "I know what I saw." She leaned forward and placed her hand over mine. "I believe that you saw something strange," she said. "But I don't believe 6 feet of snow is about to fall on the town." In the end, we agreed on a compromise. I would take the early flight to Nashville, where we had to change planes. Shelley would take the later flight as planned and meet me there. If the storm delayed her, I would continue to Florida alone and make sure we did not lose the hotel room. "As long as you are the only one staying in it," she said with a smile. I laughed. "I'll keep the other side of the bed empty." "You better." That smile is one of the clearest memories I have of her. I still see it sometimes when I close my eyes. The next morning, I woke long before sunrise. The sky outside was completely dark and covered with clouds. There were no stars. The air felt heavy and damp, and the mountains had disappeared behind low gray mist. Snow was coming, but there was still no reason to believe it would be anything close to 6 feet. My friend Hank arrived in his pickup truck to drive me to the airport. He had attached a plow to the front and seemed pleased about the storm. "Going to make some money today," he said as I climbed in. "Looks like it. Road department's paying extra if it gets bad. Just don't get yourself buried." He laughed. "A foot of snow? I've driven through worse." As we left town, I sent Shelley a message. "Get moving as soon as you wake up. Weather looks rough." She replied a few minutes later. "Yes, Dad. Have a safe flight." I looked back at the town through the rear window. The lights grew smaller as the road curved away into the mountains. I did not know it then, but that was the last time I would ever see the place. My flight left on time. The plane climbed through dark clouds, shook for a few minutes, and then broke into clear morning light above them. The mountains below disappeared beneath a thick gray blanket. As soon as we landed in Nashville, I checked the weather. Rain, not snow. According to the app, the temperature had risen again, and most of the storm would fall as heavy rain in the lower areas. Snow was still expected in the mountains, but the report suggested the town would receive less than originally predicted. I felt a wave of relief. The stranger had been wrong. The vacation was safe. I found a seat at a bar where I could see the gate Shelley would come through. I ordered coffee first, then food, and finally a beer when enough time had passed that it no longer felt wrong to drink one. I checked my phone every few minutes. At first, there was nothing unusual. Shelley had not replied to my latest message, but she was probably driving or going through security. The airport near town had poor phone service in some areas, especially during storms. I watched passengers arrive. Families came through the gate carrying bags and sleepy children. Business travelers hurried past with phones pressed to their ears. An older man stood holding flowers while he waited for someone. Shelley did not appear. Her flight time came and went. I checked the airline app. Delayed, that made sense. I sent her another message. Saw the delay. I'm waiting at the bar near the gate. No reply. An hour passed. Then another. The delay changed to canceled. My stomach tightened. I called her. The call did not connect. I tried again. Nothing. I checked local news on my phone, but the airport connection was slow. The page took too long to load. I opened the weather app again. While it was loading, I looked up at the television behind the bar. A face appeared on the screen. For one beautiful second, I felt relief. It was Shelley. She was smiling in the photograph. It was the same picture she used on her social media profile, taken on a summer day beside the river. The sunlight made her hair shine, and her eyes were narrowed slightly from laughing. I thought the local station was showing an interview or some story from the pub. Then, I saw the word beneath her picture. Missing. The relief inside me turned into something sick and cold. Before I could understand what I was seeing, Shelley's face disappeared. Another face replaced hers. Then another. Then another. Men, women, children, each picture appeared for only a few seconds. Beneath every face was the same word. Missing, the airport around me seemed to become quieter, though people were still moving and talking. I stared at the television, unable to breathe. Finally, as though waking from a dream, I looked down at my phone. The weather app had loaded. 2 large words appeared across the screen. Avalanche warning. My hand began to shake. I looked back at the television. The missing faces were gone. Now the screen showed helicopter footage. At first, I did not understand what I was looking at. There were 2 dark mountains, their lower slopes stripped of snow and covered in mud, broken trees, and exposed rock. Between them lay a wide, white emptiness. The town was gone. The roads were gone. The rooftops, the church, the pub, the houses, the small shops, and the old school were all buried beneath a smooth field of snow. The avalanche had come down through the valley with such force that it crushed buildings before covering them. The warm weather had loosened the deep snow high on the slopes. Rain had made it even heavier. Then, the entire upper layer had broken free. At the bottom of the television screen, I could see small dark marks crossing the white surface. Footprints. They seemed to begin from nowhere. The people who made them had been lucky enough to end up close to the surface. They had dug themselves out and walked across the snow, leaving tracks behind them. Everyone in the airport bar had stopped talking. A few people stood closer to the television. Others held their phones in their hands, watching without moving. The news anchor's voice finally became clear. It was flat and controlled, as if the words were too terrible to speak with emotion. Emergency teams are struggling to reach the area, he said. Road access has been completely cut off, and dangerous conditions are preventing helicopters from landing. The footage changed to show rescuers standing near the edge of the avalanche zone. Several buildings have been crushed. Officials believe the entire town has been buried beneath at least 6 feet of wet, dense snow. 6 feet. The words passed through me like ice. I could hear the stranger's voice again. Getting 6 feet of snow come Monday. Off to sunny Florida? Might catch an earlier flight. I tried calling Shelley again. The call failed. I called Hank. Nothing. I called the pub, the police station, the local hospital, and every number I had from the town. No one answered. For days, rescue teams searched the valley. They found some survivors. Most had been outside the center of town or near the edge of the avalanche. A few had somehow dug themselves out before the snow settled hard around them. Many others were never found. The snow was too deep, too heavy, and filled with broken timber, vehicles, glass, mud, and pieces of buildings. Some bodies were recovered weeks later. Others appeared months later when the weather became warmer. Shelley was not among them, neither alive nor dead. Miller's Mountain Pub had stood near the center of town, directly in the path of the avalanche. The building was crushed and carried several hundred feet from its foundation. They found pieces of the bar. They found broken chairs, bottles, part of the sign, and a section of the kitchen wall. They never found Shelley. For a long time, I told myself she might have survived. Maybe she had left town before the avalanche struck. Maybe she had taken another road. Maybe she had been rescued, but injured so badly that no one knew who she was. I searched hospitals. I contacted shelters. I followed every rumor. Nothing came from any of it. Eventually, people stopped searching. I never returned to the area. There was no town left to return to. Even now, I think about the man on the trail. I think about his thin coat, his empty voice, and the way his footprints began in the middle of untouched snow. For years, I wondered whether he had been trying to save me. Maybe he knew what was coming and could only give a warning. Maybe he had warned others too. Or perhaps he was not warning me at all. Maybe he was simply telling me what he already knew would happen. Sometimes I wonder why he told me to take the earlier flight, but said nothing about Shelley. He knew I was going to Florida. Surely he knew she was coming with me. Maybe he expected me to convince her. Maybe I failed. Or maybe only one of us was ever meant to leave. Whenever winter turns warm too quickly, I remember that final image on the news. 2 muddy mountains with a wide white field between them. A whole town buried so deeply that not a single rooftop could be seen. And at the bottom of the screen, those footprints crossed the snow. They started in the middle of nowhere, just like the footprints I had followed on the old forest path. I often wonder where those survivors walked after digging themselves out. I wonder who or what was waiting at the end of their tracks. Most of all, I wonder whether one set belonged to Shelley. Maybe somewhere beneath that terrible white silence, she heard someone speaking in a flat, empty voice. Maybe he told her exactly where to walk. Maybe he led her away from the town. Or maybe the man had never been there to save anyone. All I know is that he was right. On Monday, 6 feet of wet, heavy snow came down from the mountain, and it buried everything I had planned to return to. Story 3. I am writing this because I know I am not going to make it off this mountain. I can hear them even now. Their voices drift through the trees whenever the wind rises, screaming, crying, calling for help. Sometimes the sounds are faint and distant, almost lost beneath the sharp whistle of the cold air. Other times they are so close that I stop breathing because I am sure someone is standing only a few steps behind me. But whenever I turn around, there is no one there. The forest is empty. At least it looks empty. The wind claws through the frozen branches, shaking loose powdery snow and throwing it through the darkness. Every tree seems to move. Every shadow looks like a person trying to hide. I have caught glimpses of them all day, but never enough to see exactly what they are. A face peeking around a tree trunk, a dark head vanishing behind a rock, a body standing upright between the pines, too thin and crooked to be human, a flash of pale skin, a strand of hair blowing in the wind. Then nothing. They are always close enough to see, but never close enough to understand. They wait until I turn away before they move. Sometimes I hear bare feet rushing across the snow behind me, but when I look back, the ground is smooth. There are no footprints except my own. I have searched for their tracks. I have searched until my eyes hurt from staring at the white ground. I have seen where my boots slipped, where I fell, where I dragged my injured leg through the snow. I keep finding the same marks again and again because I have been walking in circles, but I have never found their tracks. Maybe they do not leave any. Maybe the snow covers them before I can look, or maybe they do not walk on the ground at all. I am too tired to keep asking myself questions. I have been moving for hours, stumbling through snow that reaches my knees in some places, trying to find a path down the mountain. I do not know why they are following me. I do not know why I cannot find the trail. I do not know why their voices sound so human. Perhaps a frightened part of me does not want the answers. Perhaps another part of me already knows. There are 4 of them, as far as I can tell. 2 of the voices sound like young women. Their cries carry through the trees, filled with pain and fear. One begs for help. The other calls out as if she is lost. Sometimes they scream at each other. "Where are you? Please help me. I can't find you." Their voices break at the ends of the words. Each cry stretches too long, twisting into a rough sound that is almost like an animal trying to speak. The third voice sounds like an old man. His cries are quieter, but they affect me more. There is something heavy in his voice, a sadness so deep that it makes my throat tighten. He sounds hurt. He sounds alone. He sounds like someone freezing to death in the wilderness. The first time I heard him, I almost ran toward the sound. He called from somewhere below me. "Please," he cried. "I can't walk." I answered before I could stop myself. "Where are you?" The entire forest went silent. No wind, no birds, no branches moving. For several seconds, I heard nothing but the pounding of my own heart. Then, the old man spoke again. This time, his voice came from directly behind me. "I'm here." I turned and fired my rifle into the trees. The shot echoed across the mountain. Snow fell from the branches. For a moment, I thought I saw something tall bend sideways behind a pine, moving much faster than any person could. Then the 2 women began to laugh. It was not normal laughter. It came out in sharp, broken cries, like the sounds of people choking. That was when I understood that the voices were not asking for help. They were calling me. They wanted me to answer. The 4th one never screams. She sings. I call it she because the voice belongs to a woman, or at least it sounds like one. I've never seen her clearly. I have not even caught a quick glimpse of her moving between the trees like the others. But I know she is there. Her voice is richer and clearer than the rest. She never sounds afraid. She never begs. She never cries. She sings slowly and calmly, like a mother humming to a sleeping child. There are no words in her song, only a melody. It rises and falls through the forest, moving from one place to another. Sometimes it sounds far away, coming from the other side of the mountain. A moment later, it seems to come from just beyond the nearest line of trees. The sound never stays still. It seems to pass between the trunks and beneath the snow. It echoes from the rocks, then circles behind me. I have tried to follow it with my eyes, but there is no direction to it. It is everywhere. The other three voices often scream over each other. They call my name. They beg me to stop. They shout that they are hurt. But whenever the singing begins, the others fall silent. They do not challenge her. They listen. That frightens me more than anything else. At first, I thought there were 4 separate creatures following me. Now I am not so sure. It may be one thing making all 4 voices. I do not want to believe that. Nothing should be able to move so quickly. Nothing should be able to surround me, calling from several directions at the same time. Nothing should be able to copy the voices of young women, an old man, and a calm singer so perfectly. Nothing I know of, anyway. The only way I know when the singer is close is the smell. Roses, the scent comes suddenly, even when the wind is blowing hard enough to make my eyes water. It is not the light smell of fresh flowers. It is thick and overpowering. It smells like hundreds of roses trapped inside a hot greenhouse, left there until the petals turned brown and began to rot. There is sweetness in it, but also wet soil, old roots, and decay. The smell sticks in my throat. Every time it appears, I run. I do not think. I do not look for a path. I just move as fast as I can in the opposite direction. And every time, they chase me. The women scream. The old man cries. The singer's voice rises above them all. Behind me, I hear feet hitting the snow. Some steps make sharp crunching sounds. Others land with wet slaps. They are not wearing shoes. I am sure of that. Bare feet are following me across this frozen mountain. Bare feet that leave no marks. I have spent years hiking here. I know Smoke Point Mountain better than most people in the area. I have hunted deer along its lower slopes, camped near the northern ridge, and followed nearly every marked trail around the wildlife zone. I used to come here when I needed silence. There is a kind of peace in the wilderness that cannot be found in a town or city. Up here, there are no phones, engines, arguments, or bright lights. There is only wind, snow, stone, and trees. I thought I knew this place. I was wrong. It should not be difficult to get off a mountain. If you become lost, you follow the slope downward. Water moves toward lower ground, so you find a stream and follow it. Sooner or later, you reach a road, a house, a farm, or a town. From the western and southern sides of Smoke Point, you can usually see the valley below. On a clear day, the town looks close enough to touch. At night, its lights should glow against the horizon. But I have seen no lights. I have found no road. I have not even found the lower slopes. No matter which way I walk, the ground eventually rises again. Every path bends back toward the mountain. I started on the northern trail shortly after sunrise. I remember passing the old wooden sign near the parking area. I followed the main path for several miles before leaving it to check a place where I had seen elk tracks the previous week. The weather was cold but clear. There was no storm. There were no voices. Everything seemed normal until I heard a woman screaming somewhere to the east. I thought another hiker had fallen. I shouted and ran toward the sound. That was my first mistake. The scream moved farther away as I approached. I followed it through the trees until I realized I could no longer see my own trail behind me. Then, the old man began calling from the west. After that, the second woman appeared somewhere uphill. Before long, I was surrounded by voices. They guided me without touching me. Whenever I tried to move downhill, one of them screamed from that direction. Whenever I changed course, they shifted with me. They were pushing me somewhere. At first, I thought they wanted me near the summit. Now, I think they wanted me on the southeastern face. That is where the forest changed. The trees grew closer together. Their branches tangled overhead and blocked most of the daylight. The snow became deeper, and the ground was covered with sharp stones hidden beneath the white surface. That was also where I found the first pile of bones. It stood beside a narrow animal trail. The bones had been stacked carefully into a small pillar about as high as my knee. They were tied together with some kind of dry, fibrous cord. I thought it might be plant material, but it looked almost like hair. A rabbit skull sat on top. Its empty eye sockets faced the trail. I told myself a person had made it. Maybe some local kids had been trying to scare hikers. Maybe hunters used the bones as a strange marker. Then I found another one. This pile had the skull of a vole. The next had a turtle shell balanced on top. Soon, the markers were everywhere. They stood beside trees, rocks, and narrow paths. Some were partly buried in the snow. Others looked new, with scraps of dried skin still clinging to the bones. They formed lines through the forest. At first, I believed they marked trails. Then, I realized they were not guiding people through the woods. They were forming a boundary, a web, and I was somewhere inside it. The voices became more excited after I crossed the first line of bones. Their cries no longer sounded sad. They sounded eager. That was also when I injured my leg. I was running from the smell of roses when I reached a steep drop hidden by snow. A fallen tree lay across the ground, but I did not see it until my boot struck the trunk. I flew forward and fell into a narrow ravine. The drop was not deep, maybe 10 or 12 feet, but the bottom was filled with broken branches and sharp pieces of wood. Snow covered them just enough to hide the danger. My left leg landed on a jagged branch. It cut through my trousers and buried itself in my calf. The pain was so strong that everything went white. I screamed. The forest answered. All three crying voices screamed with me. They copied the sound exactly. My own cry came back from different directions, again and again. The singer began humming. I pulled the branch out of my leg and almost passed out. Blood ran into my boot. I used the few bandages from my pack, wrapping them as tightly as I could. They did not help for long. The blood has already soaked through. Every step leaves small red drops behind me. That is what draws them now. I know it. Before I was injured, they stayed farther away. They called and watched, but they did not rush toward me. Since the fall, they have become bolder. I have seen their shapes more often. Once, I saw a woman standing between two trees. She wore a torn white dress that hung stiffly around her body. Her head leaned far to one side. Long dark hair covered her face. I raised my rifle. She moved behind the tree without taking a step. A second later, the old man screamed from behind me. Another time, I saw something crawling through the bushes. It had pale arms and long fingers, but its legs bent backward. It moved in silence until the smell of roses rose around me. Then it vanished. The trails disappeared hours ago. The sun is nearly gone now. I have spent the last part of the day moving in circles. I know because I keep finding my own bloody footprints. Sometimes I follow them without realizing it until I reach a place where I remember falling. Once, I found my own handprint in the snow. It was covered by another handprint. The second one was longer and narrower. It had 6 fingers. I ran until my injured leg gave out. Sometime before sunset, I thought I saw a house. It stood in a clearing below me, built from dark gray stone. It looked old and large, with a steep roof buried beneath snow. There was no smoke coming from the chimney, but one of the windows glowed with a soft yellow light. For the first time in hours, I felt hope. I started toward it. Then the 2 women screamed from the trees between me and the house. "Don't go there. Help us." The old man began crying from somewhere near the front door. I stopped. The singer's melody drifted from inside the house. I do not know whether the building was real. I turned away and climbed back into the forest. As I left, I saw 5 tall bone pillars standing around the clearing. They were much larger than the others, reaching almost to my shoulders. Each one had a different skull on top. I recognized the skull of a deer. Another may have belonged to a bear. The tallest pillar had an elk skull with wide antlers. I could not identify the last 2. One of them looked too round to belong to an animal. I did not go closer. After that, I started hearing whispers from the smaller bone markers. At first, I thought it was the wind passing through the empty skulls. But when I leaned near one, I heard words. The voices were very quiet. Several people were whispering at once. Most of the words were impossible to understand, but I heard my name. Richard, they knew my name before I ever shouted it. I kicked the bone pile apart. The voices in the forest stopped. For a moment, everything was still. Then, a woman screamed so loudly beside my ear that I fell to the ground. No one was there. I crawled away, leaving the broken bones behind me. Now, darkness is coming. The last of my strength is gone. I found this narrow opening in the rocks less than an hour ago. It is not a real cave. It is only a deep crack between 2 walls of granite, but it is narrow enough that nothing large can enter without coming through the front. At least, I hope that is true. I gathered as much dry wood as I dared and built a small fire at the entrance. The flames are weak, but they give me enough light to write. I am sitting with my back pressed against the frozen stone. I can no longer feel my feet. My left leg throbs with every heartbeat, and the dizziness is getting worse. I pushed myself too hard. There will be no more running. My rifle lies across my legs like an old dog ready to protect me. I have 5 rounds left. I do not know if bullets can hurt whatever is outside, but I will find out. The night has swallowed the trees. Beyond the firelight, everything is black. I can smell roses again. The scent is stronger than before. It fills the crack and mixes with the smoke. My stomach turns every time I breathe. There are whispers outside. Hands scrape across the ice. Something walks over the rocks above me. I hear bare feet moving through the snow. Slow steps circle the entrance. Crunch, slap, crunch, slap. A thin shape passed between the trees a few minutes ago. It moved upright, taking long, graceful steps. It was taller than any person I have ever seen. It stopped at the edge of the firelight. I could not see its face. Long hair hung around its body and moved even though the wind had stopped. Then it leaned forward. The smell of roses became so strong that I started coughing. I fired one shot. The shape vanished. Something laughed from above me. The screams have stopped now. That means they are close. I can feel them watching from the darkness. They are waiting for the fire to burn down. Every time the flames weaken, a hand reaches toward the entrance. The fingers are pale and thin with black nails. They pull back whenever the fire rises again. But I am almost out of wood. The singer has started her song. She is closer than ever. The melody no longer echoes through the forest. It comes from directly outside the crack. The voice is beautiful. That is the worst part. I want to listen. I want to close my eyes and crawl toward it. I understand now why the others scream. The voices are not hers. Not originally. They belong to the people who came before me. The two young women. The old man. They were lost here once, just like I am. She hunted them. She learned their voices. Now she uses them to lure the next person deeper into the mountain. That is why the screams sound frightened. Some part of them remembers. Some part of them is still trapped inside her. Maybe they are trying to warn me. Maybe they are only repeating the last words they spoke before she took them. I will know soon. The fire is almost gone. There are 4 voices hiding among the trees. Soon, there will be a 5th. This message was copied from a handwritten note discovered on the southeastern face of Smoke Point Mountain during search and rescue operations for Richard Samuel Drovel, who was reported missing on February 6. The note was found inside a narrow opening between 2 large granite formations. Handwriting experts compared the message to samples provided by Richard's family and confirmed that he had written it. Search teams also recovered his vehicle from the northern trailhead parking lot. The registration matched Richard's records, and several items inside the vehicle were identified by his relatives. Richard was last seen entering the northern trailhead of the Smoke Point Wildlife Zone early on the morning of February 6. At the time, he was wearing dark brown overalls, a green winter jacket, and a black wool cap. He was carrying a hunting rifle, a backpack, food, water, emergency supplies, and clothing suitable for the weather. Richard Samuel Drovel is a 37-year-old white man from Boise, Idaho. He is 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighs approximately 178 pounds. He has brown hair and brown eyes. At the time of this notice, he has been missing for 14 days. Search teams found no rifle, backpack, clothing, blood, footprints, or other personal belongings near the location of the note. Despite Richard's description of a fire, investigators found no burned wood, ash, or smoke damage inside the rock opening. The surrounding snow was untouched. There were no human tracks leading toward or away from the site. Several members of the search team reported smelling roses while examining the area, though no flowers or flowering plants grow on that part of the mountain during winter. The search was suspended shortly before sunset, after 3 rescuers claimed they heard a woman calling for help from the trees. The voice appeared to use Richard's name. Local authorities, Jacobs Fork Search and Rescue, and the sheriff's department have asked anyone with information about Richard's location to come forward. Residents and hikers have also been warned not to enter the southeastern area of Smoke Point Mountain alone. Since the search began, 5 different people have reported hearing voices in the forest. 4 described the cries of 2 women and an elderly man. The 5th reported hearing another voice beneath them. The voice of a younger man calling from somewhere deep in the trees. "Please," it said, "I can't walk." Story 4. For the past 3 years, I have worked at a small auto repair shop in DuPont called Ronald & Co. There are only 3 of us working there. Me, the owner Ronald, and a guy in his 20s named Diego. Even after working beside him for so long, I still cannot say I know Diego very well. He is quiet, keeps mostly to himself, and rarely talks about his personal life. Our shop is small, but we have earned a good reputation in the area. The main reason is simple. We do not cheat people. A lot of repair shops make extra money by telling customers that their vehicles have problems that do not really exist. They replace parts that still work, create unnecessary repairs, or scare people into paying for work they do not need. We do not do any of that. When there is nothing wrong with a customer's car, we tell them the truth. Even when it means we lose money, we refuse to take advantage of them. That honesty was one of the main reasons I took the job. The repair shop where I worked before paid better, but I hated the way it treated people. The managers encouraged us to sell unnecessary services, especially to customers who did not understand cars. We were expected to take advantage of anyone who looked confused, nervous, or desperate. After a while, it started bothering me too much. Maybe that makes me overly emotional, but I could not keep looking people in the eye while taking money from them for problems I knew they did not have. Leaving that job was probably one of the best decisions I ever made. Most of our customers at Ronald & Co. are older. Many of them have been bringing their cars to Ron for years. A few of the older men were not happy when they first learned that a woman would be working on their vehicles. Some would ask whether I knew what I was doing. Others would look past me and ask for one of the men, even after I told them I was the mechanic assigned to their car. Ron always defended me. He would tell them I was one of the best mechanics he had ever worked with, and that if they did not trust me, they were welcome to take their business somewhere else. Most of those customers eventually changed their minds after seeing my work. Some of them even started asking specifically for me. The incident happened in the middle of July last summer. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the weather was miserable. The heat itself was bad enough, but the humidity made everything worse. The air felt thick and heavy, as though breathing required extra effort. By 2 o'clock, my clothes were soaked with sweat. Strands of hair had stuck to my forehead and the back of my neck. All I could think about was going home and standing beneath cold water for at least 20 minutes. At the time, I was replacing the radiator fan on a 2003 Honda Accord. I had nearly finished when I noticed an unfamiliar SUV sitting in one of the parking spaces near the front of the shop. Normally, that would not have seemed unusual. Customers often parked outside and came in to explain what was wrong with their vehicles. This SUV, however, immediately caught my attention. It was large and heavy-looking, an older Land Rover, from what I could tell. Even from across the parking lot, I could see that it was in terrible condition. The body was covered in dents. The paint had been scratched and peeled away so badly that I could not tell what color the vehicle had originally been. Some areas looked dark green. while others appeared brown or black beneath the dirt and rust. I had worked on many old vehicles during my career. Some of our regular customers drove cars that were 15 or 20 years old. I was used to faded paint, cracked lights, damaged bumpers, and engines that sounded as though they were one bad morning away from dying. But this Land Rover looked different. It did not look old. It looked ruined. I stared at it for several seconds, expecting someone to step out or walk toward the shop. No one appeared. The parking lot was completely empty, except for the SUV. I called out to Diego, telling him I was going to take a closer look. I did not know where he was at that moment. He might have been in the break room or somewhere near the back of the building. I assumed he heard me. As I walked toward the vehicle, the heat rising from the pavement made the air shimmer. The closer I got, the worse the Land Rover looked. It was a 2002 Land Rover Discovery. Discoveries already have a reputation for being unreliable, even when owners take good care of them. This one seemed as though it had survived years of crashes, floods, and neglect. The front bumper was completely missing. One headlight had been shattered, leaving an empty, dark socket surrounded by broken plastic. Rust covered almost every part of the body. Several dents were deep enough that I wondered how the doors could still open. The windows were dirty, and thick grime covered the tires. There were no license plates on the front or back. That should have been enough for me to walk away and call a tow truck. Instead, I continued investigating. I still had no problem with the idea of repairing the vehicle. People brought us badly damaged cars all the time. If someone was willing to pay for the work, I was willing to look at it. The problem was that no one had claimed it. Had Ron been there, he probably would have immediately called someone to tow it to an impound lot. Ron did not like unidentified vehicles sitting on his property, especially ones without plates. But I wanted to see whether there was something inside that could help me contact the owner. I walked around to the passenger side and looked through the front window. At first, I thought the seats were covered with dust or some kind of white powder. The front seats, the floor, and part of the center console were hidden beneath a pale, uneven layer. It reminded me of flour or ash. I reached for the passenger door handle. To my surprise, the door opened easily. A warm, rotten smell escaped from the vehicle. It was not exactly the smell of garbage or a dead animal. It was sweeter and heavier than that. It made the back of my throat tighten. I leaned forward, planning to open the glove compartment and search for paperwork. That was when I noticed the white material moving. At first, the movement was so small that my mind tried to ignore it. Then, the entire surface seemed to shift. It squirmed. I stared for another second before understanding what I was looking at. Maggots, or some kind of larvae. There were thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands. They covered the seats so completely that they looked like a thick white blanket. Their bodies twisted over one another, forming slow waves of movement. Some disappeared into holes in the seat fabric. Others pushed their way back out. They were nesting inside the seats. They were eating them. I pulled away so quickly that I nearly fell backward onto the pavement. I have never been especially afraid of bugs. One fly buzzing around a room does not bother me. A spider in the corner does not make me panic. I can deal with ants, beetles, and most other insects without much trouble. But swarms are different. When there are thousands of insects moving together, they stop looking like individual creatures. They become something larger, almost like a single living mass. They remind you how many crawling things exist in the hidden spaces around you. Beneath floors, inside walls, under furniture, in the soil. Just thinking about it makes my skin itch. What I saw inside that SUV was worse than anything I had ever imagined. The larvae moved across every visible part of the front seats. Some fell onto the floor, others crawled over the dashboard. I felt as though I might vomit. I should have closed the door immediately. Instead, I looked into the back seat. I only looked for a second, but it was long enough. The larvae had filled the rear seats as well. They covered everything. I stepped away from the vehicle and tried to decide what to do. The obvious answer was to call a tow truck, the police, animal control, or anyone else willing to deal with it. That is so clear to me now that I have no idea why I did what I did next. For some reason, I decided to open the hood. Maybe part of me still thought there had to be a reasonable explanation. Perhaps an animal had died somewhere inside the vehicle. Maybe the insects were feeding on something hidden beneath the seats. I thought checking the engine might tell me whether the SUV had recently been driven. I opened the passenger door again, trying not to look at the larvae. I closed my eyes and reached beneath the dashboard for the hood release. My fingers found the handle. I pulled it and quickly jerked my hand away. Nothing touched me. Still, I rubbed my hand against my trousers as though something had crawled across my skin. I moved around to the front of the Land Rover. The hood had opened slightly. I pushed my fingers beneath the edge, found the release, and lifted it. The metal felt rough beneath my hands. Rust and dirt left black stains across my palms. I raised the hood completely. I do not know what I expected to find. An engine covered in insects, perhaps. A dead animal. A nest. What I saw was much worse because it made no sense at all. There was no engine. There were no wires, hoses, belts, pipes, or mechanical parts. There was only darkness. A perfectly black space filled the entire area beneath the hood. For a moment, I thought the shadows were simply too deep for me to see clearly. But it was the middle of the afternoon, and sunlight was falling directly onto the vehicle. Even if the engine compartment had been completely empty, I should have been able to see the ground through it. The bottom should have been only a few feet below me. Instead, the darkness looked endless. It was as though someone had cut a rectangular hole into the front of the SUV, and that hole led impossibly far down. I leaned slightly closer. The darkness did not change. It swallowed the sunlight. No detail appeared inside it. Then, something moved. At first, I noticed a small twitch near the upper edge. Then, another. My skin began to itch again. I finally understood that the darkness was not empty. It was covered with flies. Thousands upon thousands of flies had been resting so closely together that their black bodies created the illusion of a solid, lightless whole. They covered every surface beneath the hood. Some were tiny. Others were larger than any ordinary fly I had ever seen. For one terrible second, they remained still. Then all of them began to move at once. The sound came first. A low buzzing grew into a violent roar. The swarm exploded out of the engine compartment. Black bodies rushed toward my face. Flies struck my cheeks, forehead, ears, and neck. They tangled in my hair and crawled beneath the collar of my shirt. I closed my mouth as quickly as I could. I was too late. Several flew inside. I felt their wings vibrating against my tongue and the roof of my mouth. I coughed and spat, but the insects continued coming. Within seconds, they covered my arms and face. I screamed and stumbled backward. My heel caught against the pavement, and I fell onto my back. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. The flies scattered around me, joining the thick cloud pouring from beneath the hood. The sky above the parking lot became dark with them. They moved in every direction, swirling around the Land Rover and the repair shop before spreading outward. I pushed myself onto my hands and knees. My stomach turned violently. I could still feel something moving in my mouth. I spat again. Then I vomited onto the pavement. My entire body shook as I emptied my stomach. When I looked down, I saw several small black shapes twitching in the vomit. They were wet and covered in half-digested food, but some of them were still alive. I turned away and vomited again. By the time I managed to stand, most of the swarm had disappeared. A few flies still moved through the air, but the massive cloud was gone. I almost ran without looking back. Something made me stop. The hood remained open. The inside of the Land Rover was now visible. There was no engine, not even an empty engine compartment. There was only a deep, rectangular hole surrounded by rusted metal. It seemed to lead downward much farther than the size of the vehicle allowed. The bottom was still invisible. My brain recognized that what I was seeing was impossible. I no longer cared. I did not close the hood. I did not go inside to speak with Diego. I did not finish repairing the Honda. Without saying a word to anyone, I got into my own car and drove home as fast as I safely could. During the drive, I kept feeling insects crawling across my body. Every few seconds, I brushed at my arms, hair, neck, or face. Most of the time, nothing was there. That did not make the feeling stop. When I reached home, I went directly to the bathroom. I removed all my clothes and threw them into a plastic garbage bag. Then I stepped into the shower. I washed my hair again and again. I scrubbed my skin until it became red and painful. I cleaned beneath my fingernails and inside my ears. I rinsed my mouth with water, brushed my teeth, and used mouthwash until my gums burned. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the seats moving. I saw the black space beneath the hood. I felt flies inside my mouth. I remained in the shower for more than 2 hours. Even then, I did not feel clean. That night, I called Ron. I told him I had left because of a personal emergency. I kept the explanation vague. I did not mention the Land Rover, the larvae, or the flies. Ron seemed confused, but he trusted me. I had never left work without warning before, so he did not push too hard. I stayed away from the shop for 3 days. During that time, I took showers that lasted nearly an hour. Sometimes I showered more than once in the same day. I disinfected every surface I touched. I cleaned door handles, counters, tables, sinks, and my phone. I washed my bed sheets repeatedly. I vacuumed the floors and checked every dark corner for insects. Whenever I saw a fly near a window, my heart began pounding. I knew my reaction was unreasonable, but I could not control it. 3 days later, I finally returned to work. I tried to behave normally. The parking space where the Land Rover had been sitting was empty. There was no stain on the ground, no rust, no insects. Nothing suggested that the SUV had ever been there. When I had a chance to speak with Diego privately, I casually asked him about it. I tried my best not to show how uncomfortable I felt. "Do you know what happened to that old Land Rover that was here on Saturday?" I asked. Diego looked confused. "What Land Rover?" "The Discovery," I said. "The wrecked one in the parking lot. No plates, rust everywhere." He continued staring at me, as though I had described something from a dream. I didn't see anything like that. I reminded him that I had shouted to him before walking outside. He said he had been on his break. According to Diego, he returned to the main work area less than 15 minutes after I left. By then, my car was gone. He said there had been no Land Rover in the parking lot. I asked whether a tow truck had come. He said no. No customer had entered the shop. No one had asked about an abandoned vehicle. Nothing unusual had happened at all. Ron could not help explain it either. He had left around noon that day for a family event. That meant I was the only person who had seen the SUV. But I know it was there. I touched it. I opened its door. I saw the maggots moving across the seats. I lifted the hood. I felt the flies hitting my face. I tasted them inside my mouth. From what I saw, that vehicle could not have driven anywhere. It had no engine. It did not even seem to have a real engine compartment. Yet it appeared in our parking lot, without anyone seeing it arrive. Then it disappeared less than 15 minutes after I ran away. I still do not know what happened. Part of me wonders whether I imagined everything because of the heat. Maybe I suffered some kind of hallucination. But hallucinations do not leave black dirt on your hands. They do not make you vomit living flies. They do not leave you terrified of insects months later. I tried searching online for stories about similar vehicles, but I did not find anything useful. I found a few strange reports about abandoned cars, insect swarms, and objects that appeared in places where they did not belong. None of them matched what I experienced exactly. I am not sure I even want an explanation anymore. I only want to move on. I want to forget the moving white blanket covering the seats. I want to forget the sound of thousands of flies waking at once. Most of all, I want to forget that impossible black hole beneath the hood. Even now, whenever a fly lands on me, I feel my skin crawling for hours afterward. I immediately remember the swarm striking my face. Sometimes I wake in the middle of the night because I think I can hear buzzing somewhere in my room. I turn on every light and search until I am certain there is nothing there. There usually is not. But sometimes I find a single fly sitting on the wall. It never moves while I am watching it. It only sits there, perfectly still, as though waiting. I do not know whether there is any way to make that feeling disappear. Maybe time will help. Maybe nothing will. Either way, I am finished talking about it after this. I have told the story once, and that is enough. I just want to continue working, live my life, and pretend that the Land Rover never appeared in our parking lot. I want to believe that it was a single strange event that will never happen again. I have certainly heard about people having much worse encounters with manifestations like this one. That does not mean Sarah's experience was pleasant to write down. Even reading her description made my own skin itch. I think I will need to leave more time between these stories in the future. For anyone wondering, Sarah Lawrence is doing well. She still works at Ronald & Co. The shop remains open, and she has not reported seeing the Land Rover again. I do not see any reason to contact her and force her to remember something she has clearly tried to leave behind. I have not been able to discover exactly what advice my father gave her after the incident. Whatever he told her, it may have helped. Or perhaps Sarah discovered her own way to manage the fear. All I know is that she continued with her life. Considering what she saw beneath that hood, that might be the best ending anyone could hope for. Story 5. I had a dream about you the other night. No, that is not true. I did not have a dream. I am sorry. I should not have started with a lie, especially when this is meant for you. I used to do that all the time. Whenever I felt ashamed of something, I called it a dream. It was easier that way. Dreams are allowed to be strange. Dreams are allowed to be cruel. No one asks why you did something in a dream because everyone knows you had no control over it. But I had control. At least, I think I did. I could never bring myself to tell you the truth, so I hid everything inside stories about dreams. I do not think you ever believed me. You always knew when I was lying, even when you pretended not to. Do you remember when we were children? I thought I was such a good liar back then. I lied to you about small things and large things. I lied about where I had been, what I had broken, what I had seen, and what I had done. I lied so often that I began to believe you could never lie as well as I could. That part was true. You were terrible at lying. You always told the truth eventually. Sometimes it took hours. Sometimes it took days. Sometimes the truth had to grow inside you until it became too large to hide. But it always came out. I said the word again. Sorry, I know you hate it when I say that. You always did. You said I used it like a shield, as if saying sorry meant no one was allowed to be angry with me anymore. You said apologies were useless when they came after the same mistake again and again. You became so angry whenever I said it. I will try not to say it anymore. I saw you today. We were sitting together in the park, on the old wooden bench near the dead fountain. The trees were bare, though I could not tell what season it was. The sky looked pale and empty, and there were no birds anywhere. You sat beside me with your hands folded in your lap. For a long time, you said nothing. Then you turned toward me as if you wanted to speak. You opened your mouth, hesitated, and closed it again when nothing came out except a short, dry wheeze. The sound reminded me of when I was a child and I took my pet fish out of its tank. I wanted to hold it. That was all. I had seen people hold small animals before. Kittens, birds, mice. They held them close and spoke gently to them. I wanted the fish to know I loved it too. At first, I cradled it carefully in both hands. Its body was cool and smooth against my skin. It moved only a little, and I thought it understood. Then it began to resist. Its tail struck my palms. Its mouth opened and closed. Its body twisted as it tried to escape. I did not know what to do. I was afraid I would drop it, so I held on tighter. The harder it struggled, the tighter I squeezed. I remember watching its body bend between my fingers. I remember seeing the faint shape of its bones beneath the thin silver skin. I remember wondering why something I loved was trying so hard to get away from me. That was how you looked in the park. You pushed against me and turned your face away. You would not meet my eyes. I reached for you, but the more I tried to hold you, the more frightened you became. I could feel your bones beneath your clothes. Then you grabbed my wrists. For one moment, I thought you were trying to stop me. Instead, you pulled my hand closer to your throat. You wanted me to feel something there. A movement, a wound, a truth. But you could never have been anything like that fish. I was never holding you that way. I was never crushing you. You cannot take that from me. I will not allow you to turn me into that kind of person. I will not give in. Then, you spoke. For the first time in many nights, you spoke clearly. I wish I could remember what you said. Your lips moved, and I know the words mattered, but there was a terrible sound in the distance. It came slowly at first, low and deep, like metal dragging over stone beneath the earth. Then it grew louder. The noise was everywhere. It moved through the trees and shook the bench beneath us. It entered my body. I could feel it in my gums, behind my eyes, and deep inside my stomach. My teeth began to ache. My bones seemed to hum. I hated it. The sound was controlling everything. It was controlling the sky, the trees, and the air around us. It was even controlling the words coming from your mouth. You grabbed my hands and tried to make me listen. I could see how desperately you needed me to hear you, but the sound kept growing. Then you began to scream. You screamed directly into my face and pulled at my clothes, but it was too late. I had already seen it. Its legs were all around us. Long, thin shapes rose beyond the trees and curved over the park. There were too many to count. They moved slowly, almost gently, closing above our heads like the fingers of a giant hand. I looked into the sky and saw its body swaying far above us. No animal could have moved that way. No natural creature could have had such purpose. It knew exactly where we were. It had always known. You did not stay with me today. I wish you had stayed. You ruined it again. It does not matter. I forgive you. Let me start again. I could not sleep last night, so I began searching for you. I always begin with your name. It is the safest way. Typing your name into the search bar helps me become used to the feeling that comes whenever I think about you too deeply. Seeing the letters makes you seem smaller somehow. A name can fit inside a box on a screen. A person cannot. I searched every version of it. Your full name, the name you used as a child, the nickname you hated, the spelling your teachers always got wrong. I searched for photographs, old accounts, comments, school pages, work records, and forgotten profiles. Then I searched for her. I had to find her phone number again. I know where to look now. I know all of her names. I know the names she uses when she wants strangers to believe she is someone else. I know every name she says when she is trying not to say yours. I do not like her. I never did. I did not like any of your friends, if I am honest. They always looked at me as if they knew something. They lowered their voices when I entered a room. They asked whether you were all right, but they never asked me how I was feeling. They wanted pieces of you that belonged to me. I do not want her thinking about me. I do not want any of them thinking about me. There was nothing of you left in her anyway. I checked. I read every post I could find and looked through every photograph. She does not speak about you anymore. Maybe she has forgotten. That is fine. Searching for her was only a habit. It meant nothing. I will not think about her again. I am trying something new today. The idea came after what happened with your friend last night. Do not worry. I did not do anything to him. I only watched. There are only so many times I can scroll through lists of strangers, hoping one of them might be you. Every face begins to look familiar after enough time. A smile becomes your smile. A shape in the background becomes your shoulder. A hand resting on someone's arm becomes yours. Sometimes I find an account with no picture, and I become certain it is you. I send a message. I wait. Most never reply. Some tell me I have the wrong person. One threatened to call the police. Change is supposed to be good. People say that all the time. I have never liked change. It is not always the change itself that bothers me. It is knowing that something changed without my permission. A room looks the same, but a chair has been moved. A person uses a different word. A door that was always locked is suddenly open. That is worse than finding the change itself. It means something happened while I was not looking. You never liked this kind of thing as much as I did. Still, we could always talk about it. I used to send you strange pictures, ghost stories and videos of things moving in dark rooms. You would pretend they frightened you, even when they did not. It gave us something to discuss. Sometimes you asked me why I liked frightening things so much. I never knew how to answer. Maybe fear made everything simple. When you are afraid, you know exactly what matters. I hope it is all right if I begin looking for you here. I hope you do not see this. No, that is another lie. I hope you see every word. I am still thinking about her. Maybe I am jealous. I never liked admitting that. I never wanted to tell you how I felt because I was afraid you would think badly of me. I was not supposed to be jealous. I was supposed to trust you. That is what everyone said. But trust always felt like leaving a door unlocked and pretending no one would enter. It is better now. I do not think she misses you as much as I do. I do not think any of them do. That makes everything easier. They went back to work. They went out for meals. They celebrated birthdays. They took photographs where everyone was smiling. I saw them. They survived you. I did not. That proves my love was greater. I did not have enough to say when I began writing this. There was not enough for it to be worth sending. So I kept going. I added whatever came into my head, hoping the shape of it would become clear when I reached the end. It must be confusing to read all of this together. I cannot keep track of things anymore. Some days I do not remember waking up. I close my eyes at night, and then I am sitting here again. But the clock has changed, and there are new marks on my hands. Sometimes my clothes are damp. Sometimes there is dirt beneath my fingernails. Once there was a yellow flower on my pillow. I do not know where it came from. It becomes difficult to remember when things happened. Yesterday feels like childhood. Childhood feels like something I dreamed last week. It is harder when I think about the house. Our house. I miss our house. I miss you. Everything becomes difficult when I miss you. That did not make sense. I had the dream again. This time, you were standing on the porch. You looked so sad. All the sorrow I never saw on your face while you were alive seemed to have gathered there at once. It pulled at your mouth and darkened the skin beneath your eyes. I was glad. I know that sounds cruel, but your sadness meant you remembered me. If you had looked happy, I would have known you had found peace somewhere without me. You did not ask for anything. You only stood on the porch and stared at the door. So I invited you inside. Our house was waiting. It was built from everything the world had forgotten. Lost toys filled the walls. Broken teeth lay beneath the floorboards. Old photographs were pressed between layers of rotting wood. Names no one remembered were carved into the doors. The bones inside the walls had become more crooked over time. The house was still growing, and every time its shape changed, the bones bent with it. It stood on long wooden stilts now, higher than the hill where it had first built itself. The hill beneath it was cracked down the middle. Roots pushed through the openings like fingers. Our beautiful house stood above the broken hill, leaning slightly toward the trees, as if listening for someone approaching. We were so happy when you came back. All of us. You should have seen how the walls moved when you stepped inside. The doors opened before you reached them. The floor became warm beneath your feet. The children gathered in the hallway. They had missed you, too. Some were small enough to carry. Others had grown since the last time I saw them. Their faces were still wrong, but I had learned not to stare. I cared for all of them. I loved them as only a child pretending to be a mother could love anything. I washed their hair even when it came away in my hands. I sang to them when they cried behind the walls. I fed them from bowls even when they said they were not hungry. They called me mother because I asked them to. You looked uncomfortable. You always did when I spoke about the children. I do not feel like telling you what happened next. I ruined it. I wish you had stayed away from the house. I wish you had not stayed. That sounds impossible, but both things are true. You should never have come back. You should never have left. I forgot something. It was not my fault. I swear it was not. It did not simply leave my memory. It disappeared from the place where memories are kept. I reached for it, but there was nothing there. You promised it would always remain. You said that no matter what happened, I would remember. But there was only an empty space. I am sorry. Please forgive me. I know how angry you must be. I know you are reading this and thinking about all the times I failed you. But please forgive me. Forget that part. I have been selfish. I kept coming here and talking about everything because I wanted you to see how much I cared. I wanted you to understand how hard I tried. I believed I deserved something after all I had done. You never asked me to do any of it, but that should not matter. That was the point of my love. It was so strong that it pushed me to act without being asked. I watched you because I cared. I followed you because I worried. I learned the names of your friends because I wanted to protect you. I waited outside places because I did not want you walking home alone. I entered your house because you did not answer. I read your messages because I needed to know whether someone was hurting you. You never asked for any of it. But love should not need permission. Should it? It should have been enough for you. Even now, I feel as if I still have to teach you what love means. You always misunderstood it. You believed love was something that could open its hands and let people walk away. That is not love. Love holds on. Love survives. Love does not allow itself to be abandoned. You were lost without me. You simply did not know it. There are truths people discover on their own, and there are truths that must be placed inside them. This is the one truth you could never create by yourself. I had to give it to you. Do you hate me? Can I not have even this one thing? I should not accuse you. You do not deserve that from me. After the last time, nothing felt the same. No matter how long I search, I know I will not find you this way. Your name appears on old pages. Your face remains in photographs. People still mention you sometimes, though not often enough. But none of those things are you. I know there is only one place where you can be. I know where I must go. But what if you are not there? What if I reach the house and find the rooms empty? What if the children do not remember me? What if the walls no longer know my name? I do not want to know. I am afraid. I have not left my bed for a long time. The blankets have become heavy. The room smells closed and old. There are cups on the floor and plates beside the window. Sometimes I hear someone knocking at the front door. I remain still until they leave. Sometimes the knocking comes from inside the closet. That sound lasts longer. I have tried to sleep so I could bring you back in my dreams, but you will not come anymore. I close my eyes and see only the park, the empty bench, the thin legs folding across the sky. The sound returns too. It moves through the walls and into my teeth. When it becomes loud enough, I hear your voice inside it. You are calling me home. I will go soon. I will return to our house. I know it will be there for me. It does not matter where I begin searching. The road always finds the hill eventually. I will follow the yellow flowers. I will walk until the streets disappear and the trees grow close together. I will keep going when the ground becomes soft. I will not turn around when I hear footsteps behind me. The house will be waiting above the broken hill. Its stilts will be taller now. Its windows will be lit. The children will open the door. And you will be there. You have to be. When I find you, we will marry in yellow, just as we always planned. You said you hated white because it looked empty. Yellow was warm. Yellow was alive. Yellow was the color of the flowers that grew behind the house, the ones that opened only when something was buried beneath them. I saved a dress. I do not know whether it still fits, but the house can change it. The house can change anything. It changed the children. It changed me.